The story begins deep in the forest, where we meet a great sorcerer named Zagan, who is feared by the people, but he faces his toughest challenge. We see a girl before him, asking him what he plans to do with her, and we learn that he likes her, but he has no idea how to talk to her. We jump back to the previous day, as we see a girl being attacked by her knight. She wonders why he's doing this, and she slaps his face, removing his mask, so she realizes that he's a different person. He pulls a knife and cuts her dress, as she realizes he's a sorcerer, but Zagan suddenly grabs him, saying he was trying to sleep, but he heard people screaming in his yard. The man realizes that he's also a sorcerer, and that this is his territory, so he drops the knife, and offers to share his research. But Zagan isn't interested, so he blows his head off, but the blood splatters on the girl, and she faints from the shock. Zagan realizes he messed up, thinking she'll be traumatized when she wakes up, so he decides to use his reversal magic. The spell only returns everything to its original state, but since the blood is gone, she's going to think it was all just a dream. He notices her pendant and realizes she's with the church, who are the enemies of sorcerers, so he thinks she'll blame him for the attack when she wakes up. He decides to leave her on the road, and creates a teleportation circle, but someone interferes, and he thinks a regular sorcerer wouldn't be able to do this in his territory. There's someone who appears, and he realizes it's Barbatos, so he asks him not to interfere with his casting circles. Barbatos wonders what's happening, so Zagan explains that he's just punishing a creep in his garden. But Barbatos thinks he's being a hypocrite, saying they're also bad people, because sorcerers only respect their own desire for power. Barbatos notices the girl lying on the ground, realizing she has a good amount of mana, so he wonders if Zagan will sacrifice her. But he explains that sacrificial sorcery isn't his style, and he teleports the girl, but Barbatos thinks it's a waste. He changes the subject, and explains that he has interesting news, revealing that the Archdemon Marchiosa has died. We learn that the title of Archdemon grants a huge amount of mana, along with the authority to command lower-ranked sorcerers. So Archdemons are considered as the pinnacle of sorcery, and Marchiosa was the oldest among them, since he was able to survive for over a millennium. Barbatos reveals that there will be an auction in Marchiosa's territory, and the items he acquired during his lifetime will be put on sale, so Barbatos thinks it's going to be interesting. They head to the auction, but Zagan realizes that Barbatos wants to borrow money from him, so he thinks about buying the Archdemon's legacy alone. Barbatos thinks that would be unfair, because he told Zagan about the auction, and he offers to introduce girls to him in exchange for his help. So he becomes interested, but thinks they will bring too much trouble. He sees the guards agitated, and Barbatos mentions that there are kidnappers targeting young girls for experiments. Zagan thinks they're trying to summon something, but realizes it sounds ridiculous. Barbatos wonders if Zagan is one of the suspects in the kidnappings, but he thinks sacrificial sorcery isn't practical, and things would have to be pretty bad to reach that point. They arrive at the auction, and they see famous sorcerers in the area, who have prestigious titles. Zagan wonders if they're powerful, and Barbatos confirms this, saying they're also candidates for the Archdemon position left by Marchiosa, which will be decided by the other Archdemons. The sorcerers notice them, and reveal that the two are also candidates, even though Zagan is young, so he doesn't have a title yet. The host begins to present the merchandise, and Zagan imagines it could be used as a catalyst. They remove the cloak, revealing that it's an elf, a legendary race from the distant land of Norden. Zagan is taken aback by her, and the host explains that she's extremely rare, because elves aren't usually born with white hair. He starts the bidding at 10,000, but Zagan suddenly offers 10 million, leaving everyone shocked. Barbatos thinks he's crazy, and he wonders what he's feeling in his chest, thinking she's beautiful. He mentions that he found something he wasn't looking for, but Barbatos wonders what kind of sorcery he plans to use her for. Zagan approaches her, but wonders what he should say, and he asks about the collar, so the host explains that it's to restrain her mana, but none of them can remove it. He wonders if she's under a spell, but the host explains that she isn't, since normal magic isn't effective against her. He wants to hear her voice, but he ends up saying that he wants to hear the sweet sounds she makes, so he comes off as a creep. Zagan takes her to his castle, but he doesn't know what to say to her, so he tries to imagine scenarios, but it always seems wrong. He realizes that the castle doesn't look very pleasing for a girl, thinking he should have cleaned up before bringing her. She suddenly starts talking, and he thinks she sounds like an angel. She asks how she's going to die, because she wants to prepare for her death. but he explains that he isn't going to kill her because he needs her alive, and she sees the torture devices, so she thinks he's going to make her suffer. Zagan is shocked, revealing that the things belonged to the old owner, but he didn't bother to remove them. He introduces himself to her, explaining that he isn't interested in torturing her, and he blames himself for not knowing how to talk to her. She reveals that her name is Nephilia, but she doesn't have a family name, and she tells him to call her Nephi. He thinks she has a beautiful name, and asks if it's normal for elves not to have a family name, but Nephi reveals it's because she was a cursed child. She suddenly stands up, and tells him not to worry, because she has maintained her chastity, so she's still valuable for experiments. He becomes nervous, and he explains that he has no intention of experimenting on her, so she wonders why he bought her. But he can't explain what he's feeling, so he says that it's none of her business, but he doesn't understand why he keeps talking like that. He can't say that he fell in love and spent all his fortune on her, because he would look like a huge simp. He remembers that a sorcerer must always maintain composure, so he walks up to her and mentions that he'll provide her with a room, asking her to choose the one she likes best. But she misunderstands, thinking he's asking her to choose where she wants to die, so he tells her he isn't going to hurt her. He remembers that she was kidnapped and sold as a slave, so it's natural for her to think this way. He doesn't know what she means by cursed child, thinking she doesn't have a home to return to, so he realizes she's just like him. We learn that he used to live in the dumpster, and he had to steal food to survive, because he didn't have parents to look after him. He explains that he bought her because he needs her, and tells her not to talk about dying. She seems confused, so he explains that she needs to live for his sake, and she agrees to this. They start looking for a room, and Zagan thinks a place with a nice view would be good for her. He asks Nephi if she's afraid of heights, but she tells him to feel free to hang her as he wishes, so he scolds her for thinking about torture again. They climb the stairs, and Nephi almost slips, but Zagan catches her, telling her to be careful, and he starts holding her hand, but he becomes embarrassed. They reach a room, but there's a guillotine inside, so he closes the door, but she explains that he can cut her head off. He asks her to stop, telling her it's a trap to protect the castle from aerial attacks, but he realizes that his explanation sounds ridiculous. He summons a spell and throws it into the room, destroying everything inside, but Nephi is startled, since she has never seen such destructive sorcery. They enter the room, and Zagan thinks Nephi can't stay there, but she goes to the balcony and watches the moon. She says she wants to stay in that room because it was prepared by her master, so he grants her permission, saying she can use it as she sees fit. The next day, we see that Zagan wasn't able to sleep because he kept looking at Nephi. He knows that her room wasn't good enough for her to sleep in, so he let her sleep in his room, but his imagination ran wild. After she wakes up, he brings her breakfast, and she greets him, but he freezes because he doesn't know what to say, so he just gives her the food, thinking he's a failure. They eat together, but Nephi wonders why Zagan is eating the food meant for slaves. He wonders if the food is plain, and she admits it is, but she seems more concerned than angry. He realizes it's not normal to eat this kind of food, but it's what he has always eaten, so he never thought about it. He wonders what normal people eat, so she decides to cook for him. He's taken aback by this, and imagines her cooking for him, so he decides to go grocery shopping. They're about to ride a carriage to head to the city, but Zagan remembers that he's broke, because he spent everything at the auction. So he decides to walk, and wonders if he should have robbed the driver, but Nephi might think bad of him. He thinks about selling the castle and running a restaurant with Nephi, but they suddenly see the driver being robbed. He notes that she's afraid, realizing she was also kidnapped, so he tells her to watch closely as he attacks the bandits, so they wonder what a sorcerer is doing there. They attack him, and he decides to show her they aren't a threat by casually catching the man's axe. He tells the bandit that he shouldn't attack a sorcerer using brute force, shattering his weapon and pushing him away. But a hired sorcerer appears, and he finds it strange that Zagan is helping others, saying he made a promise to help the bandits, so he needs to get rid of Zagan. He uses flames to create a magic circle, but Zagan controls it, using it to summon a lightning bolt, which completely obliterates him. Zagan challenges the other bandits to fight him, but they run away, and Nephi seems scared, so he thinks he overdid it. He explains that the bandits are harmless, but she reminds him that they just attacked a carriage, and the people start laughing as they thank him for saving them. The coach driver offers him money to protect his carriage, and he realizes that he can make a fortune by helping others. But he recalls that sorcerers have a bad reputation, and he always dealt with bandits, but he was never thanked for it, so he realizes that the people like him because he's traveling with Neffy. They continue the trip, and Neffy wonders why he helped the people. He thinks about how it was unintentional, because he just wanted to show her that she doesn't need to be afraid of bandits, but he thinks it's an opportunity to impress her. So he says it was to put the dirt in its place, but he wonders why he keeps speaking nonsense. They finally arrive in the city to buy groceries, but Zagan decides to buy items for Neffy first. He wonders what a girl needs, and they head to a clothing store, but the attendant Manuela isn't happy to see a sorcerer in her store. He tells her to find something Neffy can wear, and Manuela finds her pretty, but she notices the collar she's wearing, so he realizes that it attracts attention. They try on some clothes, but Manuela picks a spicy outfit, so Zagan is shocked, and he criticizes her. So she explains that she was just trying to meet his expectations, and Neffy is embarrassed, so she tells him not to look. He asks Manuela to look for other clothes, so she shows him a silk maid's outfit, which includes magical boots with healing properties. Zagan asks her what she thinks of the clothes, and Neffy says she'll accept anything, but he warns her to be careful, or Manuela might show another weird outfit, so she tells him she likes it. They leave the store, and on the way out, Manuela goes up to Neffy, telling her she's lucky to have a master who cares for her. They go to the next store, and the attendant also seems wary of seeing a sorcerer. Zagan asks him if he can remove the collar, and Neffy is surprised, so he explains that it makes her look like the property of the archdemon Marquiosa. But the attendant realizes it's enchanted, so he can't do anything about it. He explains that the collar has a trap, thinking her head would come off if he tried to remove it, so Zagan needs to use the original key. He recalls that no one at the auction had it, so he thinks it must still be in Marquiosa's castle. He pays the attendant, but he explains that he can't accept the payment because Zagan once saved him when his carriage was attacked. He and his daughter ended up running away in fear, so he apologizes for this, but Zagan doesn't even remember that. They leave the store, but Zagan wonders why everyone is being so friendly with him, thinking it's because of Neffy, and the attendant notes that he doesn't seem as scary as before. They continue shopping, but only finish at sunset, so they decide to eat at a bar. Neffy wonders if Zagan really wants to remove the collar from her, saying she'll be able to run away from him after it's gone, so he becomes worried thinking about it. But he explains that she shouldn't get her hopes up, because removing it is going to be difficult, but he blames himself for being rude again. He notices that she's struggling to eat, and she explains that she has never used cutlery before. So he finally realizes why he felt connected when he saw her, thinking it's because she's just like him. She messes up with the fork, so she decides to use the spoon, and she finally manages to eat. He asks her what she thinks of the food, so she praises the dish, and he decides to eat, but he also struggles with the fork. So Neffy tries to feed him, but Zagan is embarrassed because she's using the spoon she ate from, and they both turn red. She notices that he doesn't usually give her orders, so she asks for permission to serve him without asking. He allows it, and he feeds her in return, but they realize that everyone is watching them. We meet a knight named Chastile, who can't believe that she was saved by a sorcerer. She recalls that they were hunting a group of sorcerers who were attacking young women, and on her way back home, she was suddenly attacked by one of the angelic knights. She realized that he was one of the face thieves, but Zagan suddenly appeared to save her, and she noticed that he looked lonely. A priest approaches her, and she tells him that the operation failed, as they lost 4 of the angelic knights. But he tells her not to blame herself, reminding her that she was able to avenge her brothers. But he believes the problem isn't over yet, telling her that Zagan is responsible for the kidnappings. She can't believe this, thinking there must be a mistake, but the priest reminds her that all sorcerers are evil, so Zagan must be put on trial even if he isn't guilty. She volunteers to deal with him, and the priest is pleased to hear this, calling her the captain of the angelic knights. We see Zagan as a child being tortured by a sorcerer, who creates a magic circle, but Zagan copies it. He wakes up from his dream, as Neffy tells him that breakfast is ready, and he remembers to say good morning to her. He realizes that she transformed the dining room, and he recalls that it used to look like a cemetery. He wonders if she bought bread, but she explains that she made it from scratch, so he praises her, and she seems happy. He asks her to join him, but she explains that she forgot to make enough food for both of them, and she doesn't have a chair. He suggests sitting on his lap, but is embarrassed by this, and she blushes, but obeys the request, and he can't believe this is actually happening. He shares the bread with her, but she thinks he's being mean, saying it's embarrassing. Days later, we see Zagan reading books, and Nephi asks him what he's studying. He explains that it's sorcery, and she doesn't understand the meaning of the circles, so he wonders if elven sorcery is different. But she explains that she can't use sorcery, and he finds it strange, since she has a lot of mana. He explains that each symbol holds power, and there's still debate about what the symbols mean, but they're used in the blueprint of sorcery, the magical circuit. He channels mana into the circle, creating electric sparks, and he mentions he can also add symbols to increase the spell's potency, and he demonstrates it, summoning a lightning bolt. He reveals that anyone can channel mana and activate the circle, so they place restrictions to prevent another sorcerer from stealing it, and the construction of these circles are called circuits. She wonders if she can make circles within a circuit, and he admits that it's an interesting idea. But to do this requires a second magic circle within the first, and doing it would disrupt the flow of mana, so perfect flow control is needed to make it work. This would allow overriding someone else's sorcery, which means that the person would be able to ward off any magical attack, resulting in the most powerful sorcery of all. But Zagan explains that all this is just theoretical, saying it's nearly impossible to do it. Nephi understands, and asks him if anyone can use sorcery if they know how it works. He's impressed with her, and mentions that she's correct, saying knowledge is directly related to power in sorcery. He reveals that he has traps in the castle to prevent the knowledge from being stolen, so she should be careful not to touch anything. So she becomes worried, but he tells her it's just a joke, since only invaders activate the traps. She asks him why he wants so much power, so he tells her he needs it to survive. He explains that he was poor when he was a child, and one day, he was captured by a sorcerer who tried to sacrifice him. But he was able to reverse the spell, and he learned that he needs to be strong to stay alive. Nephi starts to think she's weak, so he tries to calm her, but he suddenly senses people invading his territory, so he tells her to prepare dinner, while he goes to deal with the visitors. Chastal approaches the castle with her knights, and they feel like they're walking in circles, so she thinks it's because of a protective barrier. She decides to handle it, and pulls out her sword, breaking the barrier around the castle, but Zagan appears to challenge them. He recognizes the Holy Sword, knowing it's one of the 12 swords that defeated the Lord of Fiends, but he wonders why a young girl is holding it, and realizes she looks familiar. He remembers her, so he regrets letting her go, since she appears to be one of the angelic knights, and he launches the first attack, but a knight protects her. He attacks Zagan, but he breaks the man's armor, sending him flying. Another knight charges in, but Zagan easily breaks his sword, and knocks him out, before stepping on his face. Chastal prepares to fight, but Zagan warns her that he can crush the man's head faster than she can draw her sword. He explains that he would prefer to keep them alive, because he wants them to tell the church what happened, so that everyone will fear him. But she thinks he's lying, and we learn that Zagan doesn't want to kill them, because he doesn't want to scare Nephi with their bodies. Chastal is determined to kill him, and he creates a circle, but she strikes it, and it ends up breaking, but he still thinks she's weak, and he continues to dodge her attacks. She calls him a coward, but he explains that he doesn't like hitting women, and we learn that she reminds him of Nephi. She mentions that sorcery is evil, thinking it causes suffering for the people, but he thinks she's a hypocrite for attacking someone who hasn't done anything. She attacks him, so he catches her sword with a circle, but she lifts him off the ground and throws him away. He realizes she was holding back, and the holy sword is interfering with his healing. She swings her sword, so he grabs it, but she suddenly tells him to pretend he's dead. She explains that if she's defeated, a stronger knight will appear, so he needs to pretend to be dead and abandon sorcery. He wonders why an angelic knight is saying this, so she explains that he seems like a compassionate person, knowing he saved her life. He realizes that she's risking going against the church by helping him, but he can't leave Nephi alone. Nephi suddenly leaves the castle, and he yells for her to come back, but a knight throws his spear at her, so he steps in and takes the blow for her. He tells her to escape, but he suddenly senses something, as the trees begin to tremble, and Nephi starts controlling them. She manages to trap the knight, but Zagan stops her, and we see that everyone's afraid of her power. That evening, Zagan recalls how the knights fled, and he asks Nephi why she said she doesn't use magic. But she explains that she didn't use sorcery, wondering if he finds her unsettling. So he explains that he doesn't, but he reveals that he has never seen this power before and admits he's curious, so she tells him that the power is called mysticism. He remembers hearing about it, knowing it's a power that doesn't fit into logic like sorcery, and it allows the user to access powers beyond natural laws just by wishing. He wonders if all elves can use this power, but she explains it's because she's a cursed white-haired child. We learn that everyone in her village despised her because children with white hair aren't supposed to be born. But one day, they were attacked, so they asked her to use her powers to help them as a reward for letting her live. She felt devastated, so she surrendered without resisting, while the others ran away, and they all ended up dead. But she explains that she liked it and thought they all deserved it because they made her suffer. She apologizes, thinking Zagan is disappointed in her, but he confesses he would have killed the entire village along with the attackers. She thinks the people in her village will never forgive her, but he reminds her that they're already dead, saying it doesn't matter. He explains that those with power should live life strongly, and not doing so is an insult to those who died. He thinks there's nothing wrong with wanting to be strong and encourages her to seek more power, telling her that people called him evil. He remembers when he saved a girl from bandits and advised her to become stronger to survive, but the girl told him that weak people also have the right to live. He thinks the girl ended up weak because she never used her strength for anything, so unlike her, he decided to seek power at all costs. He goes to Neffy, telling her he needs her, but she wonders if she has permission to continue living there. So he confirms this, saying he can't imagine living without her, and she starts crying. She apologizes for being too emotional, and he notes that it's the first time she has talked so much. She changes the subject and asks him if his hands still hurt, but he realizes the pain is gone and his hands are healed, thinking it happened when he touched her. He looks surprised and thanks her for healing him, so she's taken aback since it's the first time he thanked her. He apologizes for not doing it before, but she tells him it's okay because he's her master. They go to sleep, but Neffy asks Zagan if they can sleep together, but he isn't sure how to respond, wondering if she understands what she just said. She explains that there's only one bed in the castle, and since he only sleeps in a chair, she wants to leave the bed for him. He realizes she just wants him to sleep well, so he thanks her for her concern, but decides to stay where he is, because that's where the central point of his barriers is located, so it's important for him to stay in that room. She offers her lap for him to lay his head on, and he sees her enthusiasm, so he accepts, but feels awkward since he can't see her face. He wonders why she's behaving differently, so she explains that he allowed her to stay after learning about her mysticism, and she's just trying to show gratitude. But he insists that she doesn't need to thank him, saying she always does a good job. He asks her if she wants to learn sorcery, and he isn't sure if it will help with mysticism, knowing she still can't control it, but sorcery will give her basic skills to defend herself. She hesitates, but he thinks she can surpass him, so she decides to accept, wanting to be even more useful to him. So he decides to take her as his apprentice, and he notes that he never imagined trusting his knowledge to another person. She remembers the story he told about the girl and how he didn't understand how the weak feel. But she realizes that despite his harsh words, he seemed sad when saying them, so she hugs him, telling him he isn't a bad person. The next day, Barbatos visits Zagan, wondering how he survived after encountering the Angelic Knights, since they had a holy sword. Barbatos wonders if the Maiden of the Holy Sword was weak, but Zagan denies this, saying she was powerful enough to destroy the barriers around the castle. Neffy suddenly appears to serve tea, and Barbatos is surprised to see her, wondering if Zagan plans to use her as a sacrifice, or keep her alive to serve him. But he corrects him, saying she's actually his apprentice, and Barbatos doesn't understand, thinking he's using her to enhance his magic. Barbatos thinks he expelled the Angelic Knights with Neffy's magic, saying that explains the mess in the yard. He wonders if Zagan wants to become an archdemon, but he only wants the key, though he admits that with the authority of an archdemon, fewer people would come after Neffy. But he knows the chances of being chosen are almost zero, since he's only been a sorcerer for a decade, while the others have been doing this for centuries, but he still thinks about securing the position in the future. He thanks Neffy for the tea, and Barbatos asks him if he's gotten attached. But he explains that there's nothing strange about valuing his own apprentice, so Barbatos thinks he's still too human, and decides to leave. She asks him if Barbatos is his friend, but he denies this, and we learn that he doesn't like being around him. He decides to repair the barriers damaged by the knights, taking Nephi with him to teach her the fundamentals of magic circles. She works hard on the lessons, and he realizes that having someone's company is more pleasant than he expected. Nephi also becomes more comfortable with him, but she's still struggling to control her mysticism. Zagan reveals that she can now use intermediate spells, but thinks her collar is still a problem. A month after they started living together, a two-headed bird suddenly breaks his barrier. It delivers a note, which mentions that the 12 archdemons are calling for him. So Zagan travels to the town of Keanoides, where the underground ruins used by the former archdemon Marchiosa is located. He finds the 12 archdemons waiting for him, and they comment that Zagan is still a child, telling him he'll be the youngest sorcerer ever chosen. He feels pressured by their intense mana, but says he'll leave if he was called just to be shown off. They reveal that he has been chosen to be the 13th archdemon, so he becomes surprised, and they show him the old emblem of Marchiosa, which he now owns. He senses the incredible amount of mana coming from the emblem and understands why ordinary sorcerers don't stand a chance against archdemons. But he wonders why they chose him, knowing there are more powerful candidates. So they admit that his power is insignificant, but there's still no sorcerer in the world capable of killing him. They tell him that he was able to defeat a powerful sorcerer named Andras at the age of 8 by learning his spell through observation and adding even more value to it. They acknowledge that he's capable of creating entirely unique sorcery, and Zagan realizes they already know his secret weapon. An archdemon explains that Zagan's skills make other sorcerers surrender their magic to him, and the archdemons tell him that they have high expectations for his future, so they decided to make him one of them. He mentions that if what they're saying is true, he could take everything from them, but they just laugh at him, and a lady in white explains that they can take much more from him. They mention that the wrath of an archdemon is pure destruction, and he's about to enter a dark world, where his memories and essence will be destroyed. But he already knows this, knowing the ultimate fate of a sorcerer is to become an archdemon, or die in obscurity. But he wonders if he has the right to involve Nephi in this, so he declares that he has one condition before he joins them. They listen to his request, and they accept it, so he agrees to become an archdemon. He returns to the castle, and Nephi notices he's a bit different, so he reveals he has become an archdemon. He reveals that in becoming one, he took over Marchiosa's assets, including the key to her collar. He uses it to set her free, but he suddenly declares that she has no more use, sending her away, and this leaves her in shock. Nephi ends up on the streets, aimless and confused, and she decides to return to the castle, but she sees her collar on the ground, realizing that her master has really abandoned her. She begins to remember the times they spent together, and realizes he lied when he said she will stay by his side. Chastal sees her moping, asking her if she's okay, and Chastal recognizes her as Zagan's companion. She tells Chastal to end her life, but she refuses, so Nephi reminds her about her duty to eliminate sorcerers, and Nephi reveals that she's Zagan's apprentice. The villagers see them, thinking Nephi is getting bullied, so Manuela interferes, telling Chastal that she should be ashamed of herself. Everyone condemns her behavior, saying they hate angelic knights, so they want her to leave, but Nephi defends her, telling them they got the wrong idea. The girls head to a tavern, where Chastal explains herself, but Manuela doesn't believe her, so Nephi mentions that Chastal never harmed her. She explains that Chastal wasn't the knight who hurt Zagan, and she thinks about her companion Torres, who is now afraid of plants, because Nephi used a tree to trap him. The waitress gives her food, and Manuela explains that she will pay for it, so Nephi eats it, but she suddenly starts crying, because she used to cook that dish for her master. She explains that Zagan abandoned her, and she doesn't understand why he did this, so Manuela asks her what happened before she got kicked out. She recalls that he just became an archdemon, and she asks them about the title, so Manuela tells her about Marchiosa, saying he used to maintain the peace in the town. She explains that young girls were kidnapped after he died, and the church caught the kidnappers. But Nephi wonders why the villagers hate the church, so she explains that everyone thinks they're corrupt, because they're demanding a ridiculous amount of money as offering. Chastal feels ashamed, but Nephi thinks the villagers shouldn't blame her, because she wasn't the one asking for money, so she realizes that Nephi is a great person. She reveals that the angelic knights were made to defeat the archdemons, and they were given holy swords for this purpose. But there are only 12 of them in existence, so she thinks the knights can't defeat the 13 archdemons. She adds that new archdemons are usually targeted by the church, hoping to defeat them before they can muster their strength. So Nephi realizes that Zagan is holding a dangerous title, thinking he left her to keep her safe. Chastal asks her if she thinks he's behind the kidnappings, but she denies this, knowing he isn't interested in weak people. Chastal agrees with her, thinking he isn't evil, and she mentions that he looked lonely, so Nephi realizes that he needs her. She decides to return to him because she wants to support him, and Chastal is determined to clear his name because there's a sorcerer trying to frame him. Manuela tells Nephi to visit her if she needs help, but she wonders why Manuela is so kind to her, so she explains that it's because they're friends. Nephi reveals that she never had friends, so Manuela is happy to be the first one, and Chastal's companions suddenly arrive, but Taurus freaks out, realizing that Nephi is with her. But a dark energy suddenly surrounds them, so Manuela flies away, and a voice claims that this is the work of Zagan, telling the knights to rescue the girls in his castle. So the knights decide to attack Zagan, but they end up falling for his trap, and he blames them for being careless. He recalls that he made the trap with Nephi, and we learn that he wants to stay away from her, because he's trying to keep her safe, knowing the church is going to hunt him down. He's about to leave, but a knight stops him, telling him to spare Chastal, because she's trying to clear his name. Manuela suddenly arrives, and she starts arguing with the knight, saying Zagan is innocent. She tells him that Nephi and Chastal have been kidnapped, and he can't believe this is happening, thinking he has failed Nephi. Manuela begs him to save them, but he thinks about the consequences, knowing the church will hunt Nephi if they find out she's his apprentice. But Manuela tells him that she wanted to stay with him, and he broke her heart by ordering her to leave, so he realizes he messed up. He admits that he was being selfish, thinking he's just as bad as the other sorcerers, and he promises to save Nephi. He creates a magic circle, saying he's about to leave, but everyone wants to join him, so he allows them to tag along. He explains that he knows who the kidnapper is, saying it's also a sorcerer, and he activates the magic circle. We cut to Nephi, as she realizes that her restraints are sealing her magic, and she thinks about using mysticism, but she notes that there are no plants in the area. We learn that Barbatos is the kidnapper, but she wonders why he's doing this, because she thought he was Zagan's friend. So he explains that sorcerers don't have friends, and he reveals that he was the student of Andras, but he's not doing this to get revenge, saying he wanted to kill Andras himself. But he reveals that he's jealous, because Zagan took everything from Andras, thinking it was supposed to belong to him. So he tried to use the church to kill Zagan, and Chastal realizes he's the one behind the kidnappings. But he explains that the face stealer started the sacrifice business, and he just needed girls to perform a major ritual, which will convince the archdemons that he deserves to be one of them. He mentions that Nephi will make an excellent sacrifice, because she has an incredible amount of mana. But she explains that he can't become an archdemon, because Zagan has already occupied the vacant spot. So he becomes devastated, thinking Zagan is taking everything from him. So he drags her to a magic circle, planning to complete the ritual, because he thinks he can still take the title from Zagan. Chastal tells him to sacrifice her instead, but he refuses, saying Nephi is a better tool for the sacrifice. Hearing this, she realizes that everyone has been using her, and Zagan was the only one who treated her with respect. So she tries to resist, because she wants to be reunited with him, but Barbatos overpowers her, and he threatens to attack her, telling her she's just a slave. But there's suddenly an explosion, as Zagan arrives, saying he's going to rescue his apprentice. He knows that Barbatos has been plotting against him, saying his suspicions began when he saw the face stealer in his territory. He knew that the face stealer was too weak to get past his barrier, so he suspected that Barbatos was involved, because he had the habit of breaking into his territory. Barbatos wonders why he was playing dumb, so he explains that he wanted to understand why Barbatos was doing this. But he realizes that Nephi got hurt, so he charges in, and he attacks Barbatos, targeting his limbs. Zagan frees Nephi, asking her if she's okay, but she explains that she was worried about him, because she knows he's lonely, so she wants to be with him. Barbatos gets back up, and he starts casting spells, but the magic circles disappear, so Nephi wonders what's happening. Zagan reveals that he knows a trick, which allows him to override sorcery, saying he can cancel spells by copying the magic circles. Barbatos thinks he inherited this power from Andras, but he denies this, saying he learned it when Andras tried to kill him. He explains that after he was captured, he saw Andras using a magic circle, so he used his blood to draw it on his hand, and he tried to escape. But Andras caught him, and he tried to use magic, but Zagan reached out his hand, and he was able to counter the spell by accident. Barbatos creates countless magic circles, but Zagan destroys all of them, so he becomes surprised, wondering how Zagan was able to counter spells that he has never seen before. But he tells Barbatos that the spells are basic, revealing that he spent years learning how to improve magic. During that period, Zagan stayed in the castle, and Barbatos kept visiting him, inviting him to have fun together, but Barbatos explains that he just wanted to spy on Zagan. He explains that he converted the magic circles into enhancement magic, revealing that he has acquired a title after he became an archdemon, and we learn that he's now called the Sorcerer Slayer. He fires a powerful energy beam, and it hits Barbatos, causing him to collapse, and he realizes he's no match. So he admits defeat, and he starts begging for his life, but Zagan approaches him, so he thinks he's going to die, reminding him that they're friends. But he explains that sorcerers don't need friends, and he charges up his fist, before delivering the finishing blow. But we see that he spared Barbatos, and he reveals that he was just fooling around, telling Barbatos to buy him a drink. Barbatos becomes upset, realizing that Zagan showed him mercy, so he promises to get revenge, but Zagan doesn't care, as long as he receives free drinks. Barbatos thinks he's crazy, but he explains that he's going to do whatever he wants, because he needs to control the world to give Neffy a good life. Barbatos' magic circle suddenly activates, and Zagan asks him what he's doing, but he explains that he didn't do it, and Zagan realizes that he activated it when he punched the ground. A dark energy appears, as he senses a strange presence, and Barbatos explains that he was planning to summon a true demon. We learn that demons used to roam the world during ancient times, but they suddenly disappeared, and there's no proof that they ever existed, but there are rumors that they came up with the symbols used in sorcery. Everyone's frightened, as the demon takes form, and Zagan recognizes it as a shadow, wondering how it was summoned without a sacrifice. It glares at him, and he senses an intense magical pressure, realizing they don't stand a chance against it, because demons are far stronger than humans. But it suddenly bows to him, recognizing him as its master, and he realizes it's because of his archdemon emblem. So he orders it to leave, and it returns to the magic circle, but after it disappears, the cave suddenly starts collapsing. So Zagan carries the girls away, and Barbatos grabs onto him, as he takes them to the exit, which is about to be sealed by the falling rocks, but Chastile's companions arrive, helping them escape. But they tell him that saving her is their priority, and he just happened to be with her when the cave was collapsing. They decide to leave, and Manuela thanks Zagan for saving her, but she advises him to work things out with Neffy before flying away. He asks Barbatos if he wants to keep fighting, but he knows he doesn't stand a chance, so he decides to buy liquor to make amends, and he teleports away. Neffy tells Zagan that she wants to stay with him, but he explains that something needs to change, telling her to stop calling him master, and he tries to tell her that he loves her. But he realizes that he can't, so he just tells her he wants to be with her until the day he dies, and this makes her happy. She shows him her collar, saying she wants to keep wearing it, because it reminds her of the moment they first met, so he puts it around her neck, thinking it's like an engagement ring. She asks him about the nature of their relationship, because he's no longer her master, but this makes him nervous, because he doesn't know how to answer the question. We see the villagers talking about Zagan, recognizing him as the new archdemon, and the sorcerer named Kamaris overhears them. So he asks the sorceress Gremory if she's okay with it, because he was expecting her to be chosen as the new archdemon. But she doesn't seem to care, telling him that things are about to change. At the church, the priest reprimands Chastile, because she refuses to hunt Zagan, knowing he saved her life twice. She explains that Zagan is innocent, but the priest tells her she's going against the church by defending a sorcerer, and he decides to remove her from her position. Her companions try to defend her, begging him to reconsider, but she stops them, and she thinks about Zagan, wanting to be like him, because he always fights for what he believes in. Chastile decides to surrender her holy sword, because she wanted to use it to protect people, realizing that the church has turned her into their lapdog. But the priest tells her to cheer up, saying her punishment is only temporary, because the holy sword has chosen her as its wielder. He tells her to be patient, but he warns her that he can only give her limited protection, and he reveals that the most notorious holy sword wielder, Raphael, is making his way to the town. So she becomes scared, thinking he's going to punish her. We see Zagan in his library, as he thinks about the archdemon emblem, wondering how it was able to control the shadow. So he goes through Marquios's books, but he can't find the answers he's looking for. Neffy approaches him, realizing he's working hard on his research, and she tells him it's time for lunch. She gives him food, and he asks her where she learned a new recipe, so she reveals that Manuela taught her how to cook. They taste it, realizing it's delicious, and she shows him the pudding she made, so he tries it, and he can't believe how sweet it is. But someone breaks through his barrier, and he knows they have a visitor, but he decides to chill, as a mysterious sorcerer enters his room. He recognizes the sorcerer as Valefor, knowing he was also an archdemon candidate, and he reveals that he wants to steal Zagan's powers. But Zagan tells him to wait, because he's still eating, saying he doesn't want the food to go to waste. But Valefor uses his arm to attack, and Zagan manages to defend himself, but he notes that Valefor isn't using sorcery. He prepares to blast Zagan, but he becomes angry, so he pushes him back, knocking him down, but his head is removed, and Neffy realizes that Valefor is a girl. So Zagan feels guilty, realizing he just harmed a girl, but Neffy tells him that Valefor is still alive, so they decide to take care of her until she wakes up. They take her to the guest room, where she regains consciousness, but she asks Zagan why he spared her life, because she was planning to kill him. So he explains that Neffy saved her, saying he would have killed her if Neffy didn't stop him, and he asks her why she attacked him. So she explains that she wanted to steal his power, knowing he's the newest archdemon, and he's known as the Sorcerer Slayer, so she thought she could defeat him if she didn't use sorcery. He knows that she used her racial abilities, calling her a dragon, but he realizes she's just a kid, and he recalls that he used to get into trouble for stealing food. So he decides to punish her, telling her to assist Neffy for a week, because he wants to teach her how to behave. But she asks him if he's going to eat her, because humans consume dragons to gain infinite mana. But he thinks this is just a legend, and he realizes that she hid her identity because she's afraid of humans. So he tells her he'll never eat her, and he recalls that he was always hungry as a kid, so he tells Neffy to prepare food for her. Valefor is confused, wondering why they're taking care of her, so Zagan explains that he's doing it for charity, and she becomes upset, thinking he's looking down on her. But he tells her not to waste food, so she starts eating, realizing that the food tastes amazing, and Zagan heads to the library, telling her to help Neffy when she's done. She warns him that she could kill Neffy if she wanted to, but he explains that she doesn't stand a chance, because Neffy is stronger than her. But we learn that Zagan is worried, so he decides to watch them, as Neffy asks Valefor if she's afraid of him. So she mentions that he has immense power, knowing she doesn't stand a chance against him, but Neffy assures her that he's a good person. She wonders why Neffy is following his orders, so she explains that he bought her, but he treats her with respect, so she wants to stay by his side. She asks Valefor if she has someone important in her life, and she reveals that she doesn't, so Zagan realizes she's all alone, and he feels sorry for her. A few days later, we see that Valefor is getting used to life in the castle, and Zagan still can't find the answers he's looking for. So he thinks about returning to Marquios's lair, thinking he's hiding secrets, because he seemed to be interested in true demons. He thinks the input of another sorcerer might be able to help him, and Valefor tells him it's time for dinner. He walks past her, as she warns him that she might attack him, but he tells her she can fight him whenever she's ready. While having dinner, Valefor apologizes for interrupting him while he was eating, and he realizes she's starting to mature. So he decides to take her to Marquios's castle, but she tells him that she could steal his knowledge if she joins him, thinking it's supposed to be kept a secret. But he explains that he doesn't care, because knowledge is meant to be stolen anyway. She wonders why he isn't forcing her to obey him, and he tells her she's just a kid, so she deserves to enjoy her freedom. But she suddenly starts crying, so Zagan cheers her up, telling her he's going to protect her while she's with him. That evening, we see Valefor sleeping, and Neffy thinks she's starting to feel comfortable around Zagan. He sees her holding a spoon, so he tries to take it, but she grabs onto him, calling him her father, and Neffy is happy, telling him she's like their daughter. So he becomes flustered, and he thinks about having a family with Neffy, thinking it will make him happy. After some time, we see Valefor writing on her diary, as she notes that she's been enjoying her life in the castle. But she thinks about the relationship between Zagan and Neffy, thinking it's strange, because Neffy stares at Zagan whenever he's sleeping. Valefor recalls that she once spied on them while they were in the library, and she saw them having an intimate moment, but they noticed her, so they became embarrassed. Valefor visits Manuela, who finds her cute, and Zagan buys clothes for her because he doesn't want her to wear her armor in public. She thanks him for the clothes, and she holds on to him as he notes that he feels strange, thinking he's starting to see her as his daughter. We see Chastel thinking about her decision to surrender her sword, and she's happy that she was able to delay the hunt for Zagan. But she wonders why she's doing this, knowing she can't be with him because he seems to be in a relationship with Nephi. She sees Zagan's group, and she's surprised to see Valefor, thinking she's his daughter. Zagan denies this, and Valefor asks him about Chastel, but he says he doesn't recognize her, so she starts crying, and Nephi reminds him who she is, saying she isn't wearing her armor. So he asks her why she's dressed as a civilian, and her companions arrive, but Valefor prepares to strike them down, so he tells her to stop, saying the town isn't a good place to start a fight. The knights tell Chastel that the priest is looking for her, so they return to the church, as Zagan asks Valefor why she wants to kill the knights. So she explains that they're the natural enemies of sorcerers, and he knows she has a point, but he's trying to avoid conflict. Zagan's group heads to Marchiosa's castle, and Valefor realizes that it smells familiar, thinking dragons used to live there. So Zagan asks her to find anything related to dragons, and they enter the castle. Valefor sees a casting circle, telling Zagan that it contains draconic patterns, and she thinks it will allow them to access a hidden door. She activates it, as he notes that Nephi appears to be jealous, so he rubs her head, as Valefor tells them she has opened the hidden door. They head deeper into the castle, and they see Marchiosa's library, as Zagan mentions that they need to find books about the Archdemon emblem. Valefor asks him if he can read people's minds, because he knew that Nephi wanted him to rub her head, but he explains that he knows how to read her clues, because they've been together for a while. She sees a strange book, and she realizes that it's about the 12 holy swords. Zagan reads it, and he sees the writing on the holy swords, realizing it looks similar to the symbols on his emblem, so he believes that the book has the answers he's looking for. At the church, we see Raphael approaching Chastel, knowing she's been removed from her position, and he asks her how many sorcerers she has defeated. But she tells him that she doesn't want to brag about her numbers, and he finds her interesting, realizing she has an attitude, so he decides to kill her. But the priest arrives, telling him to stop, and he recognizes him as Clawell, calling him a bureaucrat. Raphael knows that he confiscated Chastel's sword, and we learn that a holy sword chooses its wielder, but it can't be used by anyone else until the chosen one dies. Raphael threatens to kill Chastel so that he can take her sword, and she thinks he's pathetic, so he prepares to strike her down, reminding Clawell that she's defenseless because he confiscated her weapon. So he decides to return her sword, thinking it will keep her safe, but she notes that Raphael is about to leave, realizing he helped her retrieve her sword, and she sees a letter in her room. We cut to a tavern, where we see Zagan drinking with Barbatos, who laughs at him because he decided to adopt a girl. Barbatos asks him about the girl, and Zagan reveals that he knows her. So he realizes she's a sorcerer, but he knows that there's only one female sorcerer in the town, and she hates men. He knows that Valefor broke into Zagan's castle, but he thinks she's a man because he hasn't seen her without her armor. He mentions that she could be a dragon, and he thinks about using her body to create catalysts, so Zagan decides to keep her identity a secret. Barbatos tells him he's in trouble, because the church has sent Raphael, who has killed hundreds of sorcerers, and his next target is Zagan. But he can't believe a knight can be so powerful, and Barbatos tells him about a rumor, which mentions that Raphael has eaten a dragon. But Zagan wonders why Barbatos is telling him about this, knowing he wants something in return, so he tells Zagan that he wants a portion of Marchiosa's estate. But Zagan denies his request, because he doesn't trust him, but he tells Barbatos that he can have a few books. Raphael suddenly enters the tavern, and Zagan sees his reflection, asking Barbatos what Raphael is supposed to look like. So he explains that Raphael has a huge scar on his face, which was given to him by the dragon he defeated, and Zagan notes that he's standing right behind them. Barbatos is shocked to see him, and everyone else runs away. Barbatos prepares to fight, but his magic is cancelled by Zagan. Barbatos wonders how he can be so calm, but he notes that he doesn't sense any bloodlust coming from Raphael, so he invites him to join them. Zagan wonders what he wants, mentioning his hobby of killing sorcerers, but Raphael notes that he only snuffs out the embers that risk becoming an inferno. He asks about Zagan's fight with Chastile, wondering how she did against him, so he notes that she's the strongest person he's ever fought. Raphael thinks this makes her a threat to the church, but Zagan wonders what he means. He mentions how she objected to the church hunting him, so they have reason to dispose of her. Zagan can't believe she protected him, and Raphael decides to leave. Zagan realizes that Raphael came to confirm their relationship, and he was looking for a reason to kill Chastile, so he tells him the town is his territory, and warns Raphael that if he steps out of line, he will deal with him, but Raphael laughs, and thinks he's an interesting archdemon. Zagan tells Barbatos to check on Chastile since he can teleport. Barbatos reminds him she's also an angelic knight, but he tells him he will give him extra books, so he teleports away. Zagan goes back to the castle, and he finds Nephi waiting up for him. He tells her she should have gone to bed, but she reveals it was Valefor's idea to wait up for him. Zagan can't believe she's the one who fell asleep, but Nephi mentions she spent all day carrying Marchios's books back to the castle. Zagan notes that there were a lot of books, but Nephi thinks Valefor was happy since he told her she could stay with him for 1,000 years, since dragons have long lives. He thinks about getting rid of Raphael before they get a chance to meet, and Nephi also wishes to stay with him for that kind of time, but he notes that she will obviously be there as well, and she promises to always be by his side. They share a moment together, and they are about to kiss, but Barbatos suddenly interrupts them, and he gets pissed off. But Barbatos reveals Chastile, and it seems she has been poisoned. Zagan asks for Nephi's help, so she rushes over, and Valefor wakes up, but she sees Chastile's sword, realizing she's an angelic knight, so she transforms her arm and tries to attack, but Zagan stops her. He mentions Chastile is his guest, but Valefor reveals she became a sorcerer to get revenge on the angelic knights. Zagan wonders if Chastile ever hurt her, so she reveals that someone with a sacred sword killed her father. Zagan notes that it was a different person, so getting revenge on Chastile would be meaningless, and she would only make more enemies, which will make her revenge even harder in the future. Valefor wonders what he knows about revenge, so he notes that revenge is about making her targets suffer, driving them to despair, and making them beg for death. Nephi and Valefor are shocked to hear his explanation, and Valefor wonders if he has ever gotten revenge. He notes that he failed, because he killed the person in an instant, instead of making them suffer, so he didn't feel any better by doing it, telling her not to make the same mistake, and she ends up calming down. Chastile wakes up wondering where she is, and Zagan asks her if she remembers what happened. She recalls being summoned by a letter, and she met a mysterious person from the Reconciliation faction in the church, who believe in coexistence with sorcerers. He asked her to consider joining them, and gave her the name Orbis, telling her to call out if she ever needs help. She thinks about joining as she heads back, but that's when she was poisoned by the tea. She wonders if it was Raphael who poisoned her, but Zagan thinks he could easily just cut her down. Zagan notes that since she's Nephi's friend, she's welcome to stay at the castle, but the next day, we see her as a maid, as Zagan notes he said she could stay, but didn't say it would be for free. Valefor glares at her and runs off, so she wonders if she offended her. Zagan mentions Valefor's father to help her understand, so she wonders if she should leave, but Zagan thinks Valefor won't do anything foolish. We hear Chastile screaming, as we see a frog on her face. Zagan laughs at her, and it seems Valefor has resorted to pranking her. He notes that she's still a child, but she throws more frogs at Chastile, causing her to fall over. After 10 days, we see Valefor has continued to prank Chastile, but even she is starting to feel bad since Chastile is so pathetic. Nephi apologizes for Valefor's behavior, but she tells her it's okay. She thinks the bath is great, and Nephi notes that they often bathe together. Chastile is surprised hearing this, but Nephi is talking about Valefor, and she gets embarrassed when she realizes Chastile thought she was talking about Zagan. Zagan goes to see Valefor, telling her to show restraint with her pranks. He asks if she wants to keep living with them, knowing she still has unfinished business, so he tells her that he and Nephi will always be waiting for her. In a flashback, we see Valefor looking for her father, and we see that it was Raphael who killed him. She wakes up from her nightmare, and she considers killing Chastile, but she just ends up pinching her face instead. We see Zagan sleeping, but Nephi suddenly rushes in, telling him that Valefor is gone. We see Valefor writing in her diary, as she notes that Zagan and Nephi asked her if she wants to be their daughter, and we learn that she's happy to be around them, so she wants to stay in the castle. But she can't stop thinking about revenge, thinking an angelic knight killed her father, so she decides to hunt down the killer. She heads to Marchios's castle, thinking she'll find power inside, which she can use to defeat the angelic knights. She's about to enter, but she realizes that Raphael is behind her, and she sees his holy sword, as she recalls that she saw him eating her father's remains. But he doesn't even recognize her, so she becomes enraged, and she charges in, but she's about to get killed, as she realizes she doesn't stand a chance against him. But Zagan saves her, and Raphael is impressed that he's able to stop his attack. Zagan reveals that he was able to arrive on time because he had help from Barbatos, but Valefor wonders why he's doing this, knowing she betrayed him. But he explains that he can understand how she feels, and we see Nephi at the other side of the portal, as Zagan tells her to wait for them to return. Raphael wonders why he's defending Valefor, so he explains that she's his daughter, warning Raphael to defend himself if he doesn't want to die. He calls upon the power of his holy sword, creating a shockwave, as Zagan realizes that he's struggling to use his spell. Raphael explains that his sword is surrounded by the flames of purification, which burns away all sorcery, saying he once used it to defeat an archdemon, so Valefor is worried about Zagan. But he thinks Raphael is no match for him, and he charges in, as Raphael tries to strike him down, but he realizes that his sword isn't working against him. Zagan reveals that he learned a new spell from Marchios's legacy, which allows him to absorb mana from the environment, so the flames of purification can't defeat his sorcery. Raphael gets pushed back, but he refuses to give up, and he tries to attack Zagan, shattering the ground. But he manages to evade, and he uses his sorcery to stop Raphael, but his spell disappears, as he realizes that he still hasn't mastered it. Raphael continues to pursue him, so he uses his enhancement magic, and he lands a devastating blow, which sends Raphael crashing against the door. Zagan explains that Raphael can no longer use the flames of purification, so he can now use his magic, and he thinks Raphael is done for. But he gets back up, and Zagan can't believe this, thinking he isn't human. We cut to Chastal, as she sees the portal, and Nephi tells her what's happening. So she blames herself for everything, and thinks about interfering, but she's afraid of being branded as a traitor, thinking the church will hunt her down. Nephi reveals that she envies her, because she can help Zagan during the battle, saying her duty is to stay in the castle until he returns. Chastal knows that she's supposed to be his enemy, but she starts crying, because she wants to help him, knowing he has done so much for her. So Nephi tells her to go for it, knowing she also understands Zagan, and she tries to comfort Chastal, who wonders why she's doing this. So she reminds her that they're friends, and Chastal decides to help him, so she jumps into the portal. We return to Zagan, as he realizes that Raphael is regenerating, so he realizes that the rumors are true, thinking Raphael acquired this ability by eating Valefor's father. Valefor reveals that her father's name is Oribus, and everyone recognizes him, as Zagan mentions that he's a legendary dragon who lived for thousands of years. She reveals that he used his wisdom to help humans, but one day, he left with a group of angelic knights, and he never returned. So she decided to look for him, but she saw Raphael eating his remains, realizing that her father has been killed. She thinks Raphael betrayed him, and he suddenly charges in, but Zagan hits him and pushes him back. But he continues to target Valefor, who tries to finish him off, but Chastal interferes, stopping the fight and telling them they need to talk. Zagan agrees, knowing Raphael was trying to get himself killed, because his bloodlust disappeared after he heard the name Oribus. Chastal realizes he was the one who sent her the letter, and Zagan demands an explanation, but he suddenly senses an ominous presence, and it's coming from inside the castle. A golem appears, and Zagan notes that its energy reminds him of the shadow they encountered, so he thinks it was modeled after a demon. They realize that it's draining mana from its surroundings, and Valefor recognizes it as the guardian of the castle, so Zagan thinks the holy swords must have broken the seal. He activates his emblem, ordering it to disappear, but it doesn't work, and it fires a powerful energy beam, which is about to hit Valefor. But Raphael protects her, so she wonders why he's doing this. Zagan becomes angry, so he uses his new spell to strike the golem, shattering it to pieces. But he realizes that Raphael is mortally wounded, thinking his regenerative powers can't save him. He mentions that he has fulfilled his duty, and Zagan thinks he's trying to redeem himself, so he asks him to give them an explanation. So Raphael reveals that he didn't kill Oribus, reminding Valefor that he was too strong to be defeated by humans. Raphael explains that the angelic knights asked for his assistance because a demon was threatening the world, and he agreed to help them fight it. Valefor doesn't believe him, thinking the demons have already left the world, but he explains that one of them returned, and Oribus sacrificed his life to defeat it. But Raphael thinks the demons will return in the future, and Zagan believes him because he recently encountered a shadow, so he's trying to find a way to deal with them. Raphael tells Valefor to be proud, because her father gave his life to save the world, saying he's willing to let her kill him to make her feel better. He explains that if the demons return, humanity won't stand a chance, because the knights and sorcerers are fighting among themselves. So Oribus told him to unite them and drink his blood, so that he can fulfill his mission. Barbatos reminds him that he has killed countless sorcerers, and he knows he can't accomplish his task alone, so he needs Chastel's help, thinking everyone will follow her. But the golem suddenly recovers, so Zagan prepares to deal with it, as Raphael explains that it's a chimera, saying it was made from the demon Oribus defeated. So Zagan realizes it's dangerous, but he thinks this is a great opportunity to test another spell, and Chastel wants to fight by his side, saying she will clear a path for him. She activates her holy sword, and the flames of purification appear, as Zagan notes that she isn't as powerful as Raphael, but she appears to have better control over her powers. She charges in, as the golem fires its energy beam, but she slices it in half, creating an opening for Zagan, who punches the golem with all of his power, shattering its arm. But he sees a dark energy, realizing it's the golem's essence, which allows it to repair its body. So he decides to use another spell, as he strikes it again, and the dark energy leaves its body, as it falls to the ground. Chastel asks him about the spell, so he explains that he inverted the spell he used against Raphael, saying it absorbs mana from its surroundings, and then ignites it. He thinks his new spells are effective against demons, but he still needs to master them, saying they're still lacking in efficiency. Chastel reveals that she wants to fight by his side, so he reminds her she's an angelic knight, but she thinks it doesn't matter, and he notes that he can trust her. Zagan tries to heal Raphael, but he realizes that his injuries are too deep, thinking he isn't going to make it. Raphael tells Chastel he believes in her, thinking she can lead the Reconciliation faction, but Zagan asks him why he killed sorcerers. So he explains that he didn't want to kill them, but they kept attacking him, so he had no choice but to get rid of them. He reveals that he always smiled when he saw them, because he wanted to look friendly, but they attacked him for no reason, so he had to defend himself. Zagan can't believe this, telling him he looks intimidating, and Chastel wonders why he asked her how many sorcerers she killed, so he explains that he was just testing her. He tells Chastel to return to the church, saying he will kill the person who tried to poison her, and he tells Valefor to take his life after he completes his task. She asks him about her father, so Raphael tells her he's amazing, saying he's glad that he was able to fight by his side. He leaves to hunt down the culprit, as Valefor mentions that she no longer wants to kill him, and Zagan tells her it's time to go home. So they return to his castle, where they see Nephi waiting for them. We see Clawell in the church, as the knights tell him they can't find Chastel, so he tells them to rest, knowing it's getting late. But after they leave, he thinks about Chastel, wondering why she won't die, and he reveals that he wants to kill her, because she's helping Zagan, but the officials refuse to have her executed. We learn that he has poisoned angelic knights before, because he wanted the holy swords to pick new wielders, thinking he's doing this for the greater good. But Raphael suddenly enters the church, and he falls to his knees, so Clawell thinks this is his chance. He tries to apply poison on his wound, telling him it's medicine, but Raphael knows what he's up to, so he slices off his arm, telling him not to interfere with the younger generation, before delivering the finishing blow. But he thinks he's about to die, so he tells Clawell to wait for him in the afterlife. The next day, Chastel learns about Clawell, and she can't believe he tried to kill her. She thinks the church has taken a strange turn, so she plans to change it after she returns. Zagan tells her the tea is poisoned, so she panics, but he explains that he was just joking, saying she needs to be more careful, or people will betray her again. He tells her that Nephi didn't prepare the tea, so she thinks it was Valefor, so she tries to talk to her, but she doesn't say anything. Chastile is about to leave, promising to do her best to lead the reconciliation faction, and Raphael is happy to hear this, saying he will help her. But she can't believe he's still alive, and we learn that he went to the castle after he killed Clawell, begging Valefor to kill him, but she told him to serve her family instead. He reveals that he was the one who prepared the tea, and she's glad that he was able to survive, but he warns her to be careful, because she could be betrayed by anyone. He explains that he left the Angelic Knights, and he's now working as Zagan's butler, as Zagan notes that it's nice to have him around, thinking he's easy to relate to, because they both look intimidating. Valefor gives him a prosthetic arm, and he's amazed that he can control it, so he thanks her, saying he'll dedicate his life to her. Chastile bids them farewell, and Barbatos wants to live with them, but Zagan tells him to follow her, saying he needs to protect her. He refuses, saying he isn't a babysitter, but Zagan promises to pay him, so he decides to accept the job. Zagan notices that Nephi was worried about him, so he apologizes for leaving her last night, and she's glad that he's able to understand her. We see Valefor writing in her diary again, thinking about everything that happened. She notes how Raphael is an excellent cook, but he keeps getting in the way when she tries to watch Zagan and Nephi. Raphael teaches Nephi how to make macarons, and she tells Zagan to try it, but warns him to be gentle since they're fragile, so Zagan becomes nervous and tells Nephi to help him, so she feeds it to him, but Raphael stops Valefor from watching, telling her she's still too young. Zagan is surprised by the macarons' taste, and decides to feed Nephi, but they notice Raphael and Valefor watching them. The group heads into town, and the people comment on how cute they look. They buy ingredients for dinner, and they also visit Manuela, as Nephi gives her some of the macarons to try. Manuela mentions she has new stock, telling Nephi to try on the clothes, and Zagan notices a music player. He notes how it's a rare item created by sorcerers that focus on sound, but Manuela mentions that it's broken. She notes how some kids found it and tried to sell it, but no one was interested, so they just left it behind. Zagan thinks about how he would also scavenge for things to sell, and he decides to buy it. Manuela tells him he's paying too much for a broken item, but he mentions he can fix it. Back at the castle, Chastile and Barbatos come to visit. Chastile apologizes for being busy, mentioning that Clawell's death was declared an accident, and she had to take over his work. Zagan mentions Barbatos wasn't invited, and Valefor calls him a leech, so he yells at her, but Zagan tells him to watch his mouth when he's talking to his daughter, but Nephi invites him to join them. The girls go to prepare the food, and Valefor wonders if Chastile can even cook. She says she knows what she's doing, but instantly knocks over her basket and freaks out, but Valefor catches it with her magic. Meanwhile, Zagan works on fixing the music player, and Barbatos tells him he needs to do something about Chastile, because she's going to end up dying. Zagan wonders if the church is still after her, but Barbatos reveals how she's hopeless, staying up late to work, but she knocks over all her papers, and Barbatos can't bear to watch, helping her arrange her papers, but she stumbles again, and he catches a bookshelf. He complains he can't get any sleep while watching her, and thinks one of them will end up dying at this rate, so Zagan tells him he will treat him to drinks. Meanwhile in the kitchen, Nephi checks on how Chastile's soup is going, but when she tastes it, she runs off traumatized, mentioning that it tasted like muddy water, but Chastile seems to enjoy it. Nephi sees it as a threat to their dinner, so she tells Chastile she's a guest, and tells her to rest instead. They all have dinner together, and Chastile notes how great the food is, but Barbatos laughs at her taste. She doesn't know how he can criticize her, but he also mentions how she still sleeps with a stuffed animal, and she wonders how he knows. Zagan tells him he's drunk, and Chastile wonders if he has been peeping on her, but he tells her she's not his type. He has a drink of his soup, and finds it interesting, as we learn Valefor gave him some of Chastile's soup, so Nephi wonders if he's okay, and he suddenly passes out, as Chastile cries, realizing her soup was bad. After that, we see Chastile sleeping, and Zagan continues working on the music player. Nephi joins him, and she's glad everyone seemed to enjoy the party. She notes how he always seems to have a sad look when he thinks of his past, but he seemed to look different tonight. He thinks about how he didn't have money, but still had friends, so he thinks about going back to find them. He enjoys the music with Nephi, and she starts to sing. He's shocked by how good she sounds, and he suggests dancing, but he realizes he doesn't know how to dance. Valefor watches them, and Raphael offers to teach them. They're nervous at first, but they finally dance, and they're glad that they found each other. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.